Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird, and I'm here to do a special immediate review of this brand new issue from DC Comics. I was going to call it an episode, but it is an issue from DC Comics called The Joker, and it is part of the Year of the Villain storyline. The reason I'm reviewing this on the Horror Show channel is because, if you see here, it is partly written by John Carpenter. He wrote it with another writer here, and I wasn't sure if I was actually going to review this or if I was just going to post about it on the Instagram, which I did, and then I read it, and I thought that it pretty much definitely deserves a review. So any of you guys that don't read comics but like John Carpenter, I think this is going to be very worth your time. Any of you guys that like the Joker, I think this is going to be very worth your time. So all around, I think this is very worth your time. So this book, at the very least, is a dream for Joker fans, and it is definitely acceptable for horror fans. But then those of us that are steeped in Joker history are going to really especially appreciate this, because I did. So I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit at a time, but first things first, and I need to give proper credit where credit's due, so I'll show this opening page to give the credits here. So the writist, oh my goodness, wow, here we go. It is written by John Carpenter and Anthony Birch, so they work together on it. Pencils by Philip Tan. I love Philip Tan's work. Inks by, looks like Narc Deering, and then Danny Miki, and Jonathan Clapion and Tan. Colors by J. David Ramos, and then all the rest there as well. So, proper credit where credit's due. Now, before we actually get into the story, just as a little brief background as to what the Year of the Villain is. Right now, DC is currently doing a big overarching storyline across the universe that is titled Year of the Villain, and it stems from the Justice League comic book series. It has spanned the entire comic book, world in DC Comics, and I have a big stack of comics at this point, probably this big, that is just Year of the Villain, but this is the most recent chapter, and again, I wanted to bring it to your attention because of the John Carpenter writing, but essentially the storyline for Year of the Villain is Lex Luthor has really just had enough of the back and forth of the always, he loses, he tries to win, but he loses. So what happens is he decides at the beginning of this to liquidate all of his assets and spend all of the money on helping villains across the DC universe, give them whatever they need in order to be successful as villains. And he himself actually merges with the Martian Manhunter. He subdues and basically completely takes out the Martian Manhunter and uses him as a second skin. So now Luthor is uber powerful, and he has the ability to traverse space and time because he is helping the massive entity that is trying to come back and take over the DC universe. Her name is, God, I forgot her name already. Maybe Andromeda or something like that. It's a spanning thing and I've forgotten, but she is the new big entity that was released when the Source Wall got damaged at the end of the Dark Knight's Metal series. Anyway, so getting into this is just a pure Joker story, but that's the background of the Year of the Villain. So this actually doesn't even really tie into that, because the only thing that ties into it is currently in the Batman continuity, Bane has taken over. Batman has been exiled. Batman's dad, believe it or not, in his terrible bat form from the Flashpoint series, has taken over Gotham, and Bane controls all of Gotham. So the villains are the police force and strictly enforce terrible justice. And so Joker is left to run free. And so this is just a night in the life of the Joker free in the city of Bane. That is what this issue entails. But I wasn't sure if it was going to be dark enough to cover for the horror show, but being that it was written by John Carpenter and being where the story goes, I think it is. So just as a quick little, I'm going to kind of go through it. I'm not going to give you the spoilers, but I'm going to give you the broad strokes, and I'm going to give you my thoughts at the end. And so right now you can see that the Joker is just out there having fun in the city of Bane. He's kicking over toxic chemicals into the water supply. No one does anything about it because there are no cops. It's all villains. But he happens across this young man who has this tattoo, and the young man decides to help the Joker to be a sort of henchman, and the Joker decides to let him play henchman for the night. And so they start going around the city to the Joker's whim, and at one point they go into this convenience store, which is the Condiment King, who is a villain, a very, very D-list villain, attempts to rob the store while they're in there, and it does not go well for the Condiment King, but it's a really entertaining sort of exchange. And what they decide to do, because there are these evil guys still in Gotham trying to wreak havoc, I'm not sure, that seems to be changing. Sort of like Bernstein and Bernstein, wreak and wreck havoc. I don't know, maybe I just misunderstood the whole time. But at some point, they decide that the Joker decides that he wants to keep peace for that night. And so he gets a couple of costumes for him and his new sidekick. And of course, they decide to go out as Batman and Robin. And this is super entertaining, this whole story, because he's kind of wrapped up in it a little bit against his will, but he also knows the Joker well enough to not cross him by any stretch. And so he just kind of goes along with everything that happens, and they go and, stop crime in the way that the Joker dressed as the Batman could. And then at one point, they come across the Enchantress, who is part of the Suicide Squad, and there's a bit of a reaction to that. But you can see the artwork by Philip Tan is really, really good here. So after the Enchantress encounter, they have another little excursion to a little diner. And there's a sort of back and forth that leads to, unfortunately, the Joker holding the gun on the diner waiter, or cook, as it were. And the sidekick decides to pay for it. Unfortunately, this does not bode well with the Joker. The Joker gets quite upset about his decision to do this, and it kind of turns on him a little bit. But eventually, things move along, and I'm not going to explain exactly what happens. I'm trying not to spoil certain things for you guys. But at one point, the Robin decides to kind of make a break for it. And he says he needs to get away from the Joker, no matter what. And he does. He actually does. He kind of gets away from the Joker, but there are consequences. And it turns out that as he was going through the night with the Joker, he was letting out certain personal details. And that comes back to haunt him in a big way by the end. And he actually has a major revelation. This is starting to be where I can't show you very much, but needless to say, the Joker listens, and the Joker is much smarter than this man who has mental issues of his own tends to believe the Joker would have been. And so there are dire consequences, and the reason I wanted to cover this is frankly because of these last 5 pages. Because I was like, this is a pretty kind of standard Joker story up to this point. But this is where I'm guessing that Carpenter's influence really comes in, because there's some twists and turns that happen from this point forward that kept me so entertained, that were so disturbingly Joker, that aren't really explored a lot of the time. And so I guess I can kind of show you this just real briefly, but it ends up being very interesting. And it's kind of gross in a way, but it's so much deeper into the psyche of the Joker than you'd expect. And then the very next page, which I definitely can't show you, is an homage to a huge Joker story from the past in the Batman lore that is personally one of my absolute favorites, and one of the things that brought me into the Bat universe when I first got attracted by Nightfall, and this was one of the first older stories that I read. And the reference to that is beautiful. It's been homaged once before in Batman lore, but it's so well done, so beautifully rendered, and the end is actually very worthwhile as well. I can't show you that either, but it's not anything that you could possibly expect, especially considering it's a Joker story. So I'm not going to go that much more in depth other than to say you guys should definitely run out to your comic book store and get a copy of this. Even if you don't know what's going on with Year of the Villain, it doesn't matter. This barely even touches on that. They mention the City of Bane at one point, but that's literally it. Otherwise, it's a very excellent standalone Joker story with definitely that Carpenter touch. So I highly recommend you guys going and get your hands on it. And yeah, check it out. My personal thoughts on it are obviously it's worth your time. The story is very well done. So both Carpenter and Birch did an excellent job working together to craft this one-off story that is so inherently Joker, but also a bit Carpenter and a bit sort of, it's got a little bit of Escape from New York because the City of Bane is sort of a similar lawless city, except the evil ones are given the power. So it's very similar to that. So Carpenter is right at home writing for this. And being that it's a Joker story, I think it's definitely worth most people's time to read. So go and check it out. DC Comics Year of the Villain, The Joker. John Carpenter, guys. John Carpenter doing the Joker. Worth your time and definitely dark enough to qualify here on the horror show. So if you guys enjoyed this video, click that like button and subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss more content like this going forward. Thank you guys very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird, and remember, stay scared.